welcome to The Detail. I am your host, Kathy Antunes, and you're listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. And we're also streaming Facebook Live today. With me is Sue Memminger and Susan Majors. They are special education advocates. They're advocates for special needs kids and have a partnership business that you all work together, IEP for Parents. So to kick this off, and this was a pretty jaw-dropping case in Sarasota County, which 2 years ago, a judge ruled in October of 2019 that Sarasota County Schools had indeed dropped the ball in a big way. He called the case deliberate indifference. An 8-year-old African-American boy whose name is DJ was average intelligence, a couple of learning disabilities, was transferred without his mother's knowledge from one curriculum, which was, his special needs were being met, to a curriculum called Access Points, which is meant for children with severe cognitive disabilities. This child remained in that curriculum for nearly 7 years. And unbeknownst to his mother, it was really the big brother who worked with him wondered about the difference he was seeing between the academic awards this young boy received and what he thought was actually that these things didn't line up. So this big brother got in touch with the ladies I'm speaking with today who have dealt with IEPs, and they started advocating on DJ's behalf. But the bottom line is, and what we're going to talk about today, is the aftermath of a case where a special needs child in Sarasota County was failed so miserably by our school system. What is being done to fix the system now? What did the courts find? What is the state and the county doing to address the situation? Sue Memminger and Susan Majors, I consider you guys local heroes for special needs kids. It's not fun to go to bat, go to court. You're going to get criticized, but you really did a service. And thank you for being with me today. If you want, please tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll dive into talking a bit more about DJ. Sue Memminger, why don't you tell me how long you've lived here and how you got involved in special needs advocacy for kids?
Sure. Well, thank you for those kind words, Kathy. Just to be clear, I've been in Sarasota, 99, 2000, and I've been doing this a long time. I started because my oldest has special needs. So just trying to figure out how you navigate the complex system of, schools and jargon and education. And to be very honest, we've had a wonderful success story in Sarasota County schools. We could work collaboratively with the schools and staff for a very long time and began advocating that way. I started a magazine at one point and really felt passionate about it because, education is a civil right. You need an education. You need to be able to read, write, do math to function. And so it's been a very long, successful journey doing this until, of course, as you said, we learned about DJ. And we learned about him like we do often. We get calls all the time from parents saying, hey, I don't understand this or I don't understand that. And we're glad to help. But with this case, it was very, very different. It was, he couldn't get records. He couldn't get answers. And of course, we went to the team trying to get answers and understand what happened and working collaboratively. And we thought we were doing that for, Susan, the fall of 2018. And they just dug their heels in and basically said, nope, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. And so what choice did we have? It wasn't, it wasn't any litigious spirit. It was frankly this kid's life. So that's how we got here. And we never wanted to go to war. We never do want to go to war. But we've got to fix some problems here, and we've got to identify them and correct them. That's how I got here.
Good morning.
Majors. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for having us. So I've lived here about the same amount of time. Our family moved to Sarasota County in 2000. And I have 2 children with disabilities that went through the public school system in Sarasota County. They both graduated. They both had a successful experience. I mean, we had bumps in the road and there were things we had to work through. And there were things, because I have a child on the autism spectrum who's older, and, it wasn't as prevalent as it seems to be these days. There were lots of things that we tried that were first here in Sarasota, and the school district worked very well with us and collaboratively in a partnership. My advocacy work began when my children were diagnosed, and I got involved in my local PTA. We lived up north, and I didn't know what else to do as a parent, so I got involved in my kids' school trying to figure out how did the system work. And how could my children who were different be part of the system and be included? And from there, I started educating myself about special education because it's a process. And when we moved to Florida, I went to work for USF and then Sarasota County Schools. I was a parent liaison for them. So I went to IEP meetings with lots of families in our community.
And we should say IEP stands for
Individual Education Plan.
Okay.
And that when children are eligible for special education, every plan is individualized for that child's unique needs. And so the parents and the school system come to the table and negotiate a plan. And parents mostly, particularly at the beginning, are relying on the professionals at the table to give them information about how to help their child. What the parent brings is they are the expert in their child. They live with that child day in and day out, and they have the ultimate responsibility over the course of that child's life to help them. And so the school is a tool for that family to help meet their child's needs. Anyway, I worked for the school district for about 7 or 8 years and then went into private advocacy service. I've written a book on special education called Moms Move Mountains. And Sue and I, as you said, have IEP for Parents is a business where we provide parent education and advocacy support.
Mm-hmm. So this story became, part of the public awareness, I would say around the fall of 2019, because there was a decision, or maybe the spring, but it came to light that you had this young man who was only 8 years old when this happened to him. And he was average intelligence. I mean, I don't know. I could say it's every parent's nightmare, but I wouldn't even conceive of this nightmare, really. He was getting a National Honor Society award when he was in 8th grade. Yet he was in a curriculum for the cognitively disabled. And I think it's really important for, parents to understand his mother is a single mother. So obviously she doesn't have, it's just one parent. But he was never removed from his classroom, right? So there's a side-by-side curriculum that can happen. Tell us a bit about that. How could a parent miss this?
Well, so the interesting part about this is if you've ever worked in school districts, it's a very slow boat. It is a very slow process to make things happen. And there's meetings and there's teams and there's, a lot of work. If you typically the concern from parents is things aren't happening quickly enough. And I'd like an evaluation or I'd like a team meeting and it's slow to get that done. And in this case, this child was moved and reevaluated in a manner of 3 days. Nothing was different with his evaluation. He had been language impaired previous to this. He was identified with an average IQ and a language impairment and a specific learning disability when he was young. Nothing was different. And in this 3-day period, the documents show that the parent said, "Oh, don't include me in the meeting." However, there is no proof that the parent even really knew there was a meeting. And he was transferred into an alternative educational track with the bar being lowered incredibly to no standards in the course of 3 days, including 2 meetings. I don't know, was it a week before the FCAT at that time?
Yeah, let
Susan?
me just jump in here. I want to read a press release that was issued in October of 2019. So this was when the administrative judge ruled that Sarasota County schools had violated this young man's civil rights. And they said that Administrative Law Judge Diane Clevenger found that Sarasota County School District improperly labeled DJ as having a significant cognitive impairment so that DJ would not have to take the FCAT, now the FSA, the state standardized test required for all public school systems students on track to obtain a regular high school degree. Instead, DJ was improperly placed on a modified curriculum where he stagnated throughout elementary and middle school. So he was in 3rd grade. That's one of the benchmark times for the FCAT. And like you said, unlike most changes to a curriculum which take time, he was basically whisked out of this curriculum. And so he didn't have to take the FCAT the following week. And then he was never put back in. So can you, and he's not the only one. There were over 100 children. How did that come to light?
So as we were trying to understand what happened to this child, because it was so outside the realm of anything we'd ever seen before, we started researching, like, why would the school team have done this? It didn't make sense. It didn't follow the rules. It was not, in 2012, Sue and I, when this happened, we were advocates at the time and helping families, and we had never seen anything like this back then on a regular basis, certainly. And in 2018, we were like, what could have happened when this child was in 3rd grade that would have triggered this? So it prompted us to start asking the district questions and asking the state of Florida Department of Education, what guidance were you providing to school districts that would have allowed this situation to occur? And we couldn't get a straight answer from anybody. And finally, there was a PowerPoint presentation that we found online that the state had given to district administrators from across the state that had a PowerPoint pie chart in it showing students that were inappropriately placed. And so as we dug into that information, we realized that in Sarasota, it was not unique to this one young man. There were over 100 children that had been in a similar circumstance. But that we know of, certainly in this public way, this is the only child whose story has come to light.
Yeah. So I think, the follow-up, because in 2019, when this came to, there was a court decision, I would think that the people who had made this mistake, or those responsible for supervising the people who made the mistake, would say, we're going to get this right. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that this young man gets everything he needs, because 7 years without real instruction is a pretty devastating thing. He's a kid, right? And he was having, tell us about what was going on for him at that time.
Well, and I think it's the other thing that's important to point out, and it's a nuance, but it's really important to the story, is in 8th grade, they knew, the district knew. The state, as I said, had uncovered that this was happening. And they said to districts, you need to go back and you need to look at these children that are inappropriately placed. And you need to figure out, did you just not have the right paperwork and information? And the child really should be in a modified curriculum. Because for some kids, that might have been a true story. The paperwork wasn't right, but their needs were really there. And then there were other children, like DJ, who, when they went back and redid testing, he still did not meet criteria to be in a program for students that are cognitively impaired. And so what they did when he went to 9th grade is dump him back into the general education program without any specific supports and services to make up for all that time when he had been on a modified curriculum.
So I'm going to stop you there because it sounds like there's a couple of things that I'm wondering. And one is, this sounds like a strategy that might have been employed around the state to make sure that, grade inflation for schools. We're going to move these kids that we're concerned about how they're going to perform on the standardized tests, because the schools get graded on student performance for standardized tests. So we're going to move them from the regular curriculum where they have to take the FCAT. We're going to slide them over here, maybe for a week or two, but actually, they stayed there longer. So I'm curious about your comments on that. I mean, we certainly, in Sarasota, there were over 100 kids inappropriately placed in a curriculum, and I think this is really important, where, when it comes to studying the planets, you learn things like, instead of really building a lunar module or, understanding the different craters on the moon and all that stuff, you learn that the moon is up at night. I mean, it was a stark, dramatic difference. And I know the term mentally retarded isn't used anymore, but that, for some folks in the audience, cognitively impaired is really kids that aren't expected to live an independent life, right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Okay. So we're talking about something dramatically off. Getting back to my other question then, I would have expected, and if I had been responsible, I think many people, man, if I knew that it was on my watch that something like that occurred, I'd be, like white on rice. I'd want to make sure, and I'd be checking in all the time. Is he getting what he needs? How's he doing? All of that. That's not what happened. Tell us what happened.
Well, it isn't what happened at all. And I don't disagree with you, Kathy, that this was happening statewide. I don't disagree. And we've since come to find out and heard examples and seen the data. But that's not an excuse that it happened here and we didn't, act like our house was on fire and try to educate these kids that should have gotten an appropriate education. The problem that we see is we're still getting calls. It's still happening. Maybe it's happening a little more compliance.
I want to get to that, but I'm very curious to know what happened. What did you encounter after that court decision?
After the court decision, or once the student was moved to high school? Because they were kind of two different time frames.
No, I'm talking about a judge in the state of Florida has ruled that DJ is supposed to get compensatory educational services, and the judge has ruled, you guys really screwed up. This is bad.
So the next step, once you get that ruling, is in the ruling it said come back and meet as an IEP team, individual education plan team, with the school district and write an appropriate plan for the student. and the judge gave some guidelines on what she thought needed to be in that plan for it to be appropriate for this young man. So that's what we did. We came back with his attorney and his mom and the big brother, and we sat down with the school district, and it was by far the most hostile meeting I've ever attended. They were defensive. They did not bring truth to the table and facts about this young man's background as far as the classes he had attended in high school and his performance there. They said that the judge had ordered that his education going forward would need to be delivered from a private school, paid for by the school district, because they had lost the right to educate him. And the school district special education executive director's response was, well, we're going to appeal this decision. But that had not even come before the school board yet to make that determination. So it was just a very difficult meeting that ended in a plan that was still not appropriate to educate this young man.
So to just be clear, during DJ's, when they knew in 8th grade, part of this court case, it was discovered that the school system actually had falsified records. It was CYA mode. They were covering and they were not owning the mistake. And so, problems continued with his education. And then once they were ordered to fix it, there wasn't even a school board meeting, and you guys were told this is going to be appealed. They were combative.
Well, and along those same lines, in that IEP meeting that we went to, it was the same behavior. There were teachers in the meeting saying, oh, no, he did great in my class that year. Well, we had just been to court and proved, no, he didn't. And nobody really wanted to hear the truth. Nobody really wanted to work with us to fix the problem or educate this student. It was frankly shocking, the behavior at that meeting. So when that happens, Kathy, you either have to agree to the IEP that is set. Your only recourse as a parent, if you disagree with the IEP that the team puts together, is file another due process. So it left us with no choice. We couldn't agree with the IEP that was, based on flawed evidence again. And we were told it was just going to be very brief because they were going to appeal this hearing. It just wasn't justice still for this student. So we did have to file again.
So you filed again, and I guess it took another year, did it, for there to be a final ruling? Was it the following year in 2020?
March of 2020.
Yeah. So, to get to the question now, what was put in place? Because why, people may say, well, this already happened. Yeah, it did. But to understand the background of what a really huge, monumental mistake, right? In this young man now, he's probably about 20 now, in his education was such a travesty and a disservice to him. The bigger question, and he wasn't the only one, right? There were 100 kids, and we frankly don't know if his case was the worst. We just don't know, but it certainly was the one that was followed up on, and you all advocated. I think the bigger question is, what kind of a culture in the school administration allows this? What kind of attitudes, what kind of work environment allows or permits for something so awful to happen to a kid who, average IQ, he needed some accommodations, but average IQ, and he was basically taught the sky is blue, 4 + 2 is 6, for like 6 years. He was taught nothing. So let's talk about the culture. What did the ruling say? Because doesn't Sarasota County now have to be supervised in some capacity by the state? or am I wrong on that?
So after the court ruling, there was an investigation done by the Inspector General for the Department of Education, because there were concerns that the issues in Sarasota were broader than this one case. And so there was an investigation done, there was a report issued, and there was a letter sent to the superintendent by the Commissioner of Education. And it outlined corrective action that Sarasota County needs to put in place to try to make sure that parents have the information that they need so that this doesn't happen again.
And how's that going? I mean, you all are special needs advocates. And I'm going to put this in the context of, because you're using the acronym IEP. And the IEP stands for Individual Education Plan. And so whether you have a gifted student who needs special accommodation to actually fulfill their potential, or a special needs student, IEPs are used. Is that wrong? No? I thought that they were used for gifted as well.
Gifted students get an education plan, an EP.
Okay.
It's a state document in Florida, but IEP comes from a federal law, and it's only for students with disabilities.
But the reason you probably got confused is gifted students do in Sarasota fall under exceptional students, so they get the umbrella of procedural safeguards that parents have. So it gets a little nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, probably the confusion.
Okay. So you have this IEP process, and most recently, and I mean, if I were a parent, I could see how sitting in a room with educators regarding what some could be an upsetting meeting, that confusing, you don't know all the jargon, you want your child to do well. There's been news now that parents are not allowed to record IEP meetings. And this is ostensibly, we're being told that this is to protect privacy, which, I was talking with my husband. He asked, what's your show about this week? And I told him about the not being able to tape record or record an IEP meeting for privacy reasons. And his first question, which was mine, is whose privacy are we talking about here? As a parent, if I want to record something which frankly is technical and it's not my expertise, but is critical to the future of my child, and basically you guys work for me, right? We're all taxpayers here. I would think that it would be my right to be able to record a meeting. And it introduces a level of accountability. So what's going on there? That's been in the news. What are you seeing?
Well, I want to back up just a second to something you just said about the culture.
Yeah.
So, remember, this has been a tumultuous time in Sarasota. We had a previous superintendent, that created a lot of controversy and difficult times in Sarasota. Then we had an interim superintendent who was basically a school board employee who the school board at that time determined could be a functioning interim superintendent. So our frustration with all of this has been, where is the accountability? And when are we going to fix some of the things that have been identified as improper at best? And so Dr. Asplin came, last August, I think, and understandably, with grace, there's been COVID, there's been upheavals, there's been all kinds of things. But it's been a year, it's been a very tumultuous year. But what makes it even more difficult is the access to curriculum and education for kids with special needs in this tumultuous year with all the changes. So we were really hoping and expecting this leadership change. Culture is top down. And the first thing that really has been a public conversation has been the recording of IEP meetings in this top down leadership change. So what I would just like to make really clear is, in this 20 years of advocacy, whenever any parent has notified a Sarasota County person you're invited to an IEP meeting, the ESE liaison is typically who you notify that you would like to record your child's IEP meeting. It has never been denied. It has always been met with, sure, we're going to record also, though, and you're going to record. I mean, this started back in the day of cassette tapes, right? Mm-hmm. So now it's easy. Pop out your phone and record. So we just thought this is a non-issue. It's been happening forever in Sarasota County. What's going on? And it's turned into this very big debate about what really has transpired, how it's transpired, what's appropriate. And it is not a very, in my opinion, genuine, authentic first step to create collaboration and unify this community by taking a stand on what you've always done. And your practice has been to basically saying no in a couple of instances recently that make no sense to me.
Yes. If you're just joining us, you're listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5, LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1, LPFM in Bradenton, Florida. For 30 years, Legal Aid of Minnesota, with offices in Sarasota, Bradenton, and Venice, has provided free civil legal help for their low-income neighbors in Sarasota and Manatee County by partnering with local lawyers. These are challenging times if you're facing an emergency with issues like evictions, domestic violence, reemployment, or loss of benefits. Legal Aid of Minnesota is there to help. Information about qualification can be found online at legalaidminnesota.org and by phone at 941-366 0038. My guests today are Susan Majors and Sue Memminger. They are with IEP for Parents, a special needs education advocacy firm in Sarasota County, and it was through their efforts and this little boy's big brother that very important deficiencies in serving special need education children were brought to light in Sarasota County. So getting back to this issue of culture, you know, obviously this was a really big mistake, and it brought to light some really big mistakes. But the bunker mentality appears to still exist, especially when for years IEP meetings could be recorded by parents, as you just told us, Sue. And it wasn't a big deal. And yet it's being framed now as some strange, bizarre request that is a violation of privacy, which, I mean, the school district, I don't think has any expectation or right to privacy on these issues. It's about the kid and the family, their privacy. So if they want to record, what would the privacy issue be? I mean, what's your take?
We don't think there is one.
Yeah.
I mean, we feel like, you know, most families record for a couple of reasons. One is, as you said, because there's a lot of jargon. It's an emotional meeting. You're hearing about what your child can't do often, and you're having to process a lot of information from a variety of professionals and a lot of data. And then you leave I mean, I can't tell you how many times we process after a meeting with a family we've attended with, and what they heard and what we heard aren't exactly the same things, because we're not hearing it through the lens of it being our child. We can be more objective. We are more familiar with the process. And so I walk out and go, hey, that was a great meeting. You got X, Y, and Z. And the parent's like, it was a horrible meeting. And it's so being able to go home and listen to what just transpired is very empowering for parents, because then they are in the privacy of their own home. They can really go through it with a fine-tooth comb. They can make sure what they heard is what was said. And they can also look at the documents that they receive, which becomes even more difficult when you're on Zoom, because our meetings now are not in person. And so you're trying to look at a document on a screen that you don't get in your hands sometime till well after the meeting. And so if you then have that recording that you can compare what happened, it just allows parents to have a better understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would certainly want to do it if it were me.
And even adding to that point, Susan, the documents on Zoom, we recently had a meeting with the superintendent, and his impression, or what he told us his impression of, as far as what goes on at the IEP meeting, was, well, you've got this document and you all agree to this document, and then you've got these meeting notes, and the meeting notes are read aloud and everybody agrees to the meeting notes and everybody signs them and you all agree. So why do you need to record? And there's lots of flaws in that logic, because especially with the Zoom recording these days with meetings, what you see is one little box on the IEP and somebody's typing in that one little box. You think, you remember what was put in that box, but if you can't get the video of what was typed in the box, if you don't have the document to refer to as you would in a local environment, and oftentimes the meetings run out of time before anybody can read back notes. So you don't see the document, you don't get a copy of the document, the meeting notes are not read. And how can you possibly make that be your child's educational contract? When we get back to the level of trust and collaboration and sharing of information, I think we could have that conversation. But right now, I think to frame the fact that parents want to record IEP meetings in some kind of negative capacity just perpetuates that us versus them conversation, rather than let's be collaborative and work together. And sure, if it helps you, let's do it. What if mom can't attend? What if dad can't attend? Mm-hmm. All kinds of reasons to record.
Yeah. So when it comes to the state, because what happened was a $250,000 judgment, right, for services for DJ. But is there any role in the state having a closer look? I think, Susan, you might have said that, like after the whole case had been adjudicated and the term deliberate indifference was used to describe what happened here. What is the state doing to ensure that there's a culture shift? Are they doing anything here in Sarasota?
The only thing that I know of that they are doing is the training that Sarasota County has been required to provide for parents about access points and what is it and what are the
which is the modified curriculum is access points. That's the name of it.
If your child is going to move to access points, then there is training for parents about what is access points, what are you consenting to, what are possible limitations for your child in the future if you go down that path, because there's certain, like a child, it can't go to a degree seeking program at a university if they graduate with a modified curriculum diploma. They cannot possibly go in the military because they don't accept that modified curriculum diploma. So there are some choices that you're making as a parent when you give consent. And consent for moving to a modified curriculum is a newer concept. Like when it happened to DJ, there was no requirement that parents give consent. That was a later state statute that happened, I think, in 2015 or 16. So, so the state is overseeing the curriculum for those trainings. Other than that, I don't know what oversight that they're doing, but certainly the state knew. The state knew in 2015 that this had occurred. Their job is to provide oversight for the federal funds that pass through them that go to the school districts for special education. Other than telling the districts to figure out which kids these were and reevaluate them, there didn't seem to be any follow-up on the outcomes for the students that were impacted. And that's so.
Well, I was just going to clarify something Susan said. Although the state mandated training, and Susan said they mandate training, that doesn't mean if the school district is recommending your child for an access point curriculum, our district reaches out and says, hey, come look at this video and look at this training. Parents are still today going to IEP meetings with the school staff in Sarasota, telling them, our recommendation is an access point curriculum for your child. And people still don't know what that means. We're still getting those phone calls. At the end of last school year, we are still getting those phone calls. So although they say there's training, and yes, I will agree, there is training available if a parent knows this is what's relevant for my child, connecting those dots is still not an easy process for parents. The compliance has gotten better on behalf of the district, I will say. I think that's another intentional outcome of this. They don't want this to happen again. Nobody wants this to happen again. But, we used to be a stellar district. We used to be this amazing place that you could reach out and work for a collaborative education for your child. And anymore, that culture has changed.
So, out in the real world, let's call it, but because sometimes these it can become insular. Certainly that happened right here, that there was a problem and everybody was protecting. Quite honestly, that's a pretty big fail. And I don't know, I think heads should roll over that. People who should have been watching and should have been protecting. I mean, isn't that your job? When you show up, you're going to make sure that the kids are getting what they need. And God forbid, a child who's of average intelligence is put in a program where he's learning nothing for 7 years. Seems to me there's some people who should have lost their jobs. And I mean, I'm not going to ask you to. I just don't get it. I mean, as if you're just paying taxes and want to know that things are going right. But were there any changes like that? Did you see any accountability?
We saw promotion. We saw reorganization internally in the district staff.
Somebody got promoted?
Yeah.
Somebody got promoted who was responsible for this?
Well,
really? Wow.
So there's a district high-level executive director.
Uh-huh.
And then beneath her, there's 2 directors. And Dr. Asplund has reorganized the department. And one of those, was it a director now is an executive director.
And those 2 director positions were promotions that happened in the midst of this. The people were the same, but their position was elevated.
Really? I mean, so we talk about promoting kids who shouldn't be promoted from one grade to another, but we've got an administration that's responsible for that. And the administrators were promoted. They were given title changes or salary. Okay. I mean, not okay, but I just don't understand why that could be, in the part of this larger culture where people complain, every kid gets a trophy. Kids need to learn, right? That sometimes you get one and sometimes you need to learn to win, to lose. Like, wow, I mean, isn't this... The adults need to learn. You don't get a trophy for screwing up like that.
And what's really scary for us too is that we get calls pretty regularly from teachers, and they're teachers that are trying to figure out how to help their students because we've been in this community a very long time. We've had a lot of clients whose kids have been, teachers' kids, administrators' kids. And we have good relationships with people in the schools. And so when they're trying to sometimes navigate the system that they work in, occasionally we get those phone calls about, hey, I've got this child, not the details on the child, but just the situation, and I'm looking for help, and I'm afraid to ask because I'm going to get backlash for bringing things forward. And so what we need to change is that when something isn't going well, that we duck and cover instead of coming to the table and figuring out, how do we solve the problem? How do we work together? Most parents, believe me, everybody runs into somebody that is not reasonable in their expectations. We've had those clients over the years, and you have to educate about what's possible and what isn't. But 99% of the families we work with, they just want their child to be successful. They want to have the services their child needs. And they're very reasonable when they feel like they have partners that are trying to help. It's when they run into nasty emails and people not telling the truth and feeling like you're missing something and you don't even know what it is that they're not telling you, but your gut tells you you're not getting the whole story. And so when we talk about culture, that's what we're talking about. We need to go back to the collaborative teams that when Sue and I, when our kids were little, that is what we encountered. We moved here and people were like, all right, we don't know a lot about autism. And so our team needs training. And the school district provided training. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. We have, 40,000 plus kids. Their needs are going to be a variety. Not every teacher is going to know how to help every child that's in their classroom, but we have the capacity to figure out how to help those kids and help those teachers. That's what we should be doing.
Well, and it's back again to the culture shift with, when we had this conversation with Dr. Asplin, and we're like, well, what have you done to change this and to make this better? And his answer was that he is going to have assistant principals at each school be responsible for ESE issues. We've been here a long time. We've seen where they've said assistant principals at the school should be responsible for ESE issues, for different issues. Frankly, it's just another layer. The principal at the school has always been the buck stops here guy. Why are you now giving a number 2 person responsibility for an entire department and issues? It's just another layer parents have to go through. The ESC liaisons, most of the time, do a great job working with them collaboratively. And what we're seeing now in a lot of instances is this finger pointing and these people all feeling scared and working in isolation. And this problem is the top-down culture change to say, this is what I expect from my staff. This is the customer service level that I expect to my stakeholders. The answer is not to lawyer up and to bring your attorney to IEP meetings because you're fighting the parent or you think the parent is going to fight you.
So
the answer is be more collaborative.
You're talking about the school district lawyering up, that's happening, that they're bringing their lawyer to sit on meetings with parents. I mean, this is very intimidating, autocratic sort of behavior.
And, Sue and I have been doing this a long time as advocates, but we're not attorneys. I mean, we're moms who have navigated this system. We always joke, we're 2 moms at a kitchen table trying to help other parents because we've been in their shoes. Mm-hmm. But we don't come from a legal background, even though we're familiar with the laws and rules of special ed. Now, if some parents, if they ask Sue and I to attend a meeting, the district brings an attorney. And even when the parent sends the superintendent an email saying, my child's very life depends on your help, please don't bring an attorney because I can't bring one. The answer was, well, if you're bringing advocates, we're bringing an attorney. And so the parent in that instance felt like they had no choice and they used their life savings
to
try to get help for their child. And I mean, this is new. This is not an old story. This is a current story that I'm telling. And, we're in somewhat of a better place, but that child's story is as egregious as DJ's.
Well, it really is. And the other thing was we thought, all right, we'll go to that meeting with the attorney. Dad didn't hire an attorney. We went to the meeting. But Dad requested they record the meeting and, notified. Didn't request because you don't have to request. That's a conversation for another time because we're running out. But the parent notified the school district that they were going to request and the district didn't respond. They waited until we got into this big meeting with lots of people that we had to wait a long time for. And Dad was pressing because the family had plans and wanted to get this straightened out and fixed. And we enter the meeting, and the first thing the school team kicks off with is, "Oh, we're denying your request to record." And we were like, "Why are you denying the request to record? On what basis?" And the school board attorney said, "Well, there's a school board policy that we don't record meetings." Well, so the school board attorney, paid for by taxpayer dollars, is now telling things that are not true to a parent who's a stakeholder.
Because there have been, to be clear, for decades, meetings have been recorded. The policy is just notify, of course you can record. That's the policy.
And it's not even a written policy. It's just a practice. There is no written policy.
Okay.
But, this family was told you can't record because it's a policy. And they were told that by the school board attorney. And they wound up canceling the meeting.
Well, the family would have brought a note taker. And so we won't get into the nuances of, the what occurred, but you can't participate in a meeting and take notes. One important fact, I'm going to backtrack here. In the second DJ case, one of the reasons that also led us to filing a second due process was the notes we got from the district after we finally got them from that first resolution meeting where they told us, we can do this because we're going to appeal you. The notes we got were inaccurate. So you can't tell us the notes are accurate when we've lived through notes being inaccurate, and we've proved that in a court of law.
Right.
So it's, we need to be authentic here a little bit. And the second point I'd like to make about the DJ case, there was not a single recording in any of the DJ cases of an IEP meeting. So
there's no protection in the school. Like, things can go horribly wrong. It's a weird bunker mentality that you can't record a meeting. Yeah. I want to read something to you all. I know online, and a parent was asking in a chat room about advice. She's moving, and she's happy with the support that she's gotten, right, for her child. I will be moving to the Sarasota, Bradenton, Lakewood Ranch area from New Jersey. She describes her child's age, IEP, disability. Can anyone tell me what schools have resources and inclusive programs? Thank you so much. And the answer was stay away from Sarasota. And they mentioned a particular school as well. We moved from Massachusetts, and within months, they attempted to strip my son of his entire IEP, claiming they had, quote, data to back it up. He was an online student. So I don't know how they could have data. I bring this up because there's a reputation that's happening. And I know one of the reasons I chose Sarasota was the schools for my kids. What would you, when it works well, and I assume at one point it did, what does that look like? What, we've just got a few minutes left. What needs to happen here? And is it beginning to happen? And what would it look like if it were working?
So I think it's fair to say when Sue and I come to a meeting, it's usually because of parents in crisis. So the meetings that we see are certainly ones that aren't going well, usually. I mean, we have some families that are just, we go to all the time, and those go fine. And it's just sort of like they like having a second set of ears. But other families, it's crisis time is when they're looking for help. I think when it's going well, it's because the team is working together and sharing information and sharing ideas and keeping the family in the loop. And communication is key. Making sure that the parent knows how the child is doing, and if they have questions, they get answered. What would make the difference is the customer service. Mm-hmm. We have got to get back to that customer service model, and not the parents are customers, because they're more than that. They're stakeholders. They're part of the team, but when they ask questions, it should be embraced and welcomed that parents want to be part of the team for their child. We shouldn't give them a hard time.
Yeah.
Well, in some of the systemic issues we have that are challenges within certain disability groups in Sarasota that parents see time and time and time and time and time again, we need to figure out a plan to fix those things that are not going well, whatever the systemic issue is. In some instances, it might be allocation of resources. In other instances, it might be teacher training or teacher support. Whatever we identify, but you cannot continue to pretend that these things aren't occurring. Like the recent ESE meeting we had, parents were given just a few short minutes to actually say, here's what my concerns are. Yet those were never reported out to the group. That information was never given back to the group. So if you don't welcome the people you're asking for input, and if you don't truly listen to what their concerns are, we aren't going to be moving it towards a better place.
No.
So I think we need to do those things.
So the parents' input wasn't even recorded. I mean,
it was recorded,
transcribed,
but it wasn't shared back to the audience. So it was captured, but when you it's always a one-way conversation. Parents are being talked at instead of having a conversation with the staff.
Yeah.
So they held a meeting. They invited parents. They gave a very short period of time for parents to post what their concerns were in an anonymous sticky note fashion. But there was no regrouping of what are the concerns, and hey, is there a systemic issue we could address here, or could we unite parents and figure out a way they could help each other? It was kind of glossed over, moved on to the next thing, and parents have requested, can I get that information back from the school district? And they're very nicely telling the parents no.
So
and
still the parents,
right? They're doing they're doing the analysis themselves to try to figure out what to do with that information. But again, the community wants to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. Well, and it's your child. You should be involved. And the networking that can happen and helping each other would be a great thing. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me. If you're going to change a culture, you've got to look at what's going on. People are human. I hope that COVID certainly is a huge issue right now and pressing, but I'm hoping we can continue the conversation and that the leadership in Sarasota County Schools will just soften up a bit and lighten up and start collaborating in a better way. We certainly do need to do right by our kids. So thank you, ladies, so much for being with me today. Susan Majors, Sue Memminger with IEP for Kids. That's the name of your firm, am I right? For parents. You all have been listening to The Detail on WSLR 96.5 LPFM in Sarasota, Florida, and WBPV 100.1 LPFM for in Bradenton, Florida. If drinking's no longer fun for you and separates you from other people, you can attend an AA meeting. They've been there. More information is available by phone at 941-951-6810 or online at aasrq.org. And ladies, real quick, do you have a website where people can find out more about your work?
IEPforparents.com.
Okay, all right.
Is it OR?
IEPforparents.com. Thanks so much for joining me. Everybody stay tuned for more great public affairs programming on WSLR. Make it a great day.
6.5 LPFM in Sarasota and WBPV 100.1 LPFM in Bradenton.
Meals on Wheels Plus of Manatee County is providing home-delivered meals to Manatee County residents. All home-delivered meals are approved by a registered dietitian. Participants who qualify for the program include individuals that are homebound, have difficulty shopping or preparing food, or individuals that are over the age of 60. More information and registration is available at 941-747-4655 or online at mealsonwheels+.org/home-delivered-meals/.
From New York, this is Democracy Now!
With the courage that I had in me, I went to the office to start my work, but the current system soldiers didn't give me permission to start my work. They told me that the regime has changed. You are not allowed. Go home.
Since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, many women say they're afraid to go out. An Afghan news anchor says the Taliban prohibited her from returning to work. We'll speak with 3 Afghan women, 2 former journalists who have fled their country, one in 2017, one last month, and one who left Friday. She says, "My Taliban